I'm actually the lead engineer at Venco, one of the sponsors of this event. So a bit about me. When I'm not working, I listen to music. I love rap music as well. Favorite artists: Kendrick Lamar, 21 Savage, Future, and sometimes Kodak Black and all of that. But that's not what we are here to discuss. So yeah, we were trying to discuss about Frappe. I know Frappe is a very novel framework, but it's kind of similar to Django. So Frappe is basically um, it's a low-code web framework similar to Django, and it's also battery included. So what it basically do is how it compares to Django is that it allows you to write less code or far less code than Django. So it's built with Python, of course. It's a full stack framework, so it comes with a front end as well. That's JavaScript. So what powers Frappe is actually Python, JavaScript, and MariaDB or Postgres database on the back end, basically. So it was developed in 2006 as part of the project from an Indian guy called Rushab. So Rushab was building out an ERP platform, and at some point he had to break out the framework that was powering that ERP, and that's what how Frappe framework came about. So you have links there. So there's a link to the Frappe framework, how you can get it installed, and a tutorial on how it works, basically. It's open source. So for people like me who didn't major in computer science, open source code is what I use to learn new stuff in code, basically. It also has a support forum. That's what the Discourse forum is about. So if you have issues with using the framework, you can ask your questions. You can also find frequently asked questions there and find answers to them. And then that's the Frappe Cloud, Frappe.io. So it's open source. You can either choose to deploy your own server or you can choose to use their own cloud, which you have to pay for, basically. So that's a bit on Frappe. So Frappe, like I said, was used to build ERP Next. That was the primary objective of the framework. But over time, they've expanded and they've built other open source apps using Frappe framework as well. Frappe, HR, Cloud, Insights, that's like the data science kind of it, and a bit of them. So we also use Frappe as for our backend at Venco. So that's what it's about. So I think the next is, yeah. So I'm going to quickly go about. So it's a very large framework. There is a bit to it, but I'm just going to highlight the major features of Frappe. First of all, it's metadata first, and what Frappe refers to as metadata is what they call doc types. Doc types are basically what you refer to as models in Django. Uh, it's just what you define as schemas, but extra information about the schema. For instance, I would want to create, let's say I wanted to create a table called, um, let's say I'm building a library, for instance. I could create a table called books, right, which has the schema for the title of the book, the author of the book, and all of that. But there might be other information that attaches to that entity. So, for example, who has permission to use this entity and a bit of other information regarding the object. It also has an admin user face. I think we're all familiar with Django as well, having a UI, an admin UI for you to interact with the backend. They call it Desk. That's DESK, the Desk UI. It's just a simple single page application. So what else does it do for you? It also helps you manage goals and permissions. So I know when you build backend applications, you always have to manage users and their permissions and all of that. So it comes shipped with that as well, so you don't have to bother about that. You can extend it. That's the point of the framework. So you can build on top of the framework and just expand the functionalities that it provides. and that's where your own code comes in. Yeah, so it exposes REST APIs. You can build your own APIs, and there are also standard APIs that can expose data from your server without having to create APIs. So it's also, like I said, it's low code. You don't have to write everything. You can also expose webhooks or send webhooks to other servers based on events. A job scheduler is just something that allows you schedule jobs using cron jobs, basically. I think most framework has that. And then socket.io. So Frappe being a full full stack application comes with socket.io to allow for uh, pushing data to the front end using web sockets. I'm sure you are all familiar with how WebSocket works. So it also comes shipped with that. You don't have to integrate a WebSocket within the application. Um, of course, email setup is just what it uses to integrate with an SMTP client. So it has an SMTP client for you to, as well as IMAP client for you to connect to a server, basically. And then, of course, it's multi-tenant. Multi-tenant means it doesn't. Multi-tenant means it has support for multiple servers. So what I mean by that is that you can host one server and use it to serve multiple sites. Basically, that's what multi-tenant means. Okay, I think this is better. Thanks. Yeah, so that's all for battery included. So this is the architecture of Frappe. I think we're all familiar with how you build your Python applications. It has to have a virtual environment where you have a good control of your Python packages and their versions. Um, and on top of that, you have Node.js, which sort of powers your sockets IO and communications with your front end. WebSock is your common gateway interface. That's how you expose your web server to a common gateway interface. Redis as well. Redis is utilized for both the socket IO and as well for caching. So Redis is an in-memory store. If you don't need to store data in your database, you can store in Redis. Yeah, and then your background jobs as well. And then you have your apps. The framework comes with Frappe, and then you can add your own apps. So the apps are basically repositories, GitHub repositories. So the framework in quotes is a multi-repo where you can use one framework to build multiple apps and just use one framework to run all of it. And then you have your sites built on top of your framework. So you can have multiple sites, and that's why it's referred to as multi-tenant application. And then you have your database, which could be MariaDB or Postgres. So MariaDB and Postgres here means it needs those database to work. But over time, you can also connect your framework with any other database. You could also use MongoDB, for instance. You just have to define the ORM yourself. But if you choose to use this, then it comes with an ORM that can easily connect to any of this, basically. So that's it for that. Um, yeah, so this is a bit on the project directory. You have your apps, you have your configurations for Redis. It could be Nginx in production and all of that. Your environment, your virtual environment, logs, your POC file, which that defines all the process that needs to run for your framework to be up, that's the server to be up. And inside your sites, you have your apps. Each site has the apps that are installed in it in quotes, and then your configurations and all of that. Oops, just okay. All right, thanks. So next slide. Um, yeah, so this is what you have in your apps. Might not be very clear, but what you have there are basically your modules. So an app can have several modules where you have different Python files. Say, for example, I was building, let's say I'm building a school. I could have modules for academic, administrative, library, and those are like modules, right? And then you can have your individual codes within them. So all of them are organized for you. So it has a modular structure to the applications that you install in it, as well as other information like your public files, CSS, JavaScript that will be used as part of what he uses to build your admin UI for you. So we don't waste much time. Next slide. So this is your POC file, the processes that run in your server, on your Frappe server. You have your Redis cache for caching, Redis socket IO, Redis queue, this for background jobs. And then you can watch, let's say you are running this in production, you can watch for changes in your file. Whenever you make changes to your file, it basically just restarts your server, so you don't um, have to manually restart that. Then you can schedule. That's how you schedule background jobs. And then these are all the workers you have, short, long, and default. They just define the times or the timelines for those events or tasks. So next is,
Hello.
yeah, this is what your admin UI looks like.
Hello. Hello.
So it just exposes a user interface for you to easily manage your modules, your doc types, you could also have dashboards there or reports based on your data. So all of it is can be accessed from the admin UI. So the admin UI can serve as both a back office for people that work with your team. It could also be
Okay.
used what you use for your system
Mm,
administration,
mm,
basically, because it
mm,
also exposes
mm.
tool that allows you to also build on the application. So you don't always have to push code to GitHub and deploy to a server. You can administer your server right from the desk UI without having to do much. So that's also part of what they mean by low code. So we're going to quickly look at some of the features. So this is doc types. This is me creating what you would term a model in Django. So you basically just want to create a table and define the metadata for that table. So you could doc types are basically tables in SQL, or if you do MongoDB, it's like a collection basically. You get to define the fields and also other information like it also has features like having to track changes. Whenever somebody makes changes to a document, you see who made the change because it's embedded with users as well. You can see who is seeing that information and a couple of other information here that's useful for relational databases as well. Um, so part of the fields it has is a password field. Basically, that's noteworthy because it also embeds with encryption at rest. So you can opt to encrypt certain kind of information your from your from in your doc type basically. So that's password field, and then it also has field level permissions. What that means is that you can decide to make certain information from a table hidden if you don't have the necessary permission. So that's one of the metadata it allows you to add to your schema, and it manages all of this for you without having to do much. Next is, yeah, so these are permissions you can define on a doc type, which you can understand as a table. You can create roles basically and define what those roles can do, what they can read, write, create, and all of those code operations on your objects, which are your doc types basically. And all of this is done from, the admin desk UI. So next is, yeah, so this is a user. So you could create users and assign them roles. And these roles has been assigned with permissions that defines what they can do and what they can't do. So if every user has an API key, you can also generate them from here. And if those API keys are used to query data or perform code operations on your server, the framework could use this information to check if they have permission to those resource. And it also handles the response, maybe a 403 or whatever, um, out of the fly. So let's move to the next slide. Yeah, so this is also part of the admin UI. It's called the system console. It's similar to your IPython console for those that would use the terminal to um, write scripts for their server. So the system console has just an input box where you can basically write Python, what's it called, statements, and you run them from your clients, and it basically run this on your server, but you are actually putting these statements from your UI, and then you get to see the print result there. So this is actually not available by default. You have to enable it, and also restricted to a system manager. That's the system administrator of the server. So that's part of the security that was built as to make this more secure, because this is very risky from a security perspective. It also has restricted what's it called, access. For example, you can't use an import statement on these scripts. So you can't basically see what's inside the server's code. You can only send commands, basically. So and other form of restrictions, just to make sure you have only the necessary things to administer your server right from the desk UI. Um, Server scripts. This also similar to system console, but server scripts are are just basically adding more scripts to your existing server code. So server scripts they can be triggered by events. It could be when you want to run a certain script when somebody saves or adds a book to a library. Let's assume you build an application for a library. So you want to say you want to run a server script when an event happens, maybe when somebody updates a file or creates a new file or deletes a file. You can listen for those events, and your script will be run automatically by Frappe when those events occur. You can also create what's it called, schedule jobs from here as well. You can schedule jobs to run every 5 minutes, every 10 minutes without having to log into your server and configure or push code to GitHub, basically. Permission queries are also a thing here. So there are times when we have new partners that wants to partner with Venco, and because of that, they need certain API access from us. And what that means is that we need to expose API to a third party that isn't part of our standard API on our server. So in that case, we basically use this. We could use this, and we could use a permission query to restrict what they can see, basically. Um, yeah, so that's one of the helpful part of it. Yeah, and then yeah, this client scripts, it's not Python. This is just JavaScript, but you can actually write it from here. It defines, you can put dynamic and JavaScript code for your for forms and list views on your UI without having to, as usual, push to GitHub and all of that. So a recorder is also part of the UI. It allows you to profile and monitor your server. So what you have here is something that basically intercepts requests coming into your server. You can see I'm seeing all the API requests coming to my server and the method, whether it's a get, a post, a delete, or whatever. And I can see the number of queries that is being sent to my database from those APIs and how long it takes. So you can use this to profile in production. It's not enabled by default. You have to enable it, and it has some overheads. Imagine having to log all of this while in production. So you only use this when you need to debug. It gives you information about the headers that were sent in those requests, the response, and each queries that's run in those requests. And you get to also see how long it took. So this is one tool you can use to profile your server to see how well your code performs. Um, so next, event webhooks. I'm sure many of you have been integrated with payment gateway systems where you need to listen for events. When someone makes a payment, you need to process them. So you can also trigger your own webhooks from here. I could send a webhook to a server when certain events happen, and I just define, the headers, the requests that should be the payload that should be sent to that server based on a certain event. You could also set security signatures, which just serve as security to your to those requests to make sure that the person on the other end validates is coming from your end. So these are all embedded within the UI without having to do anything in your code, basically. You could create web pages. So I could create a new web page that is not in code, part of my standard and server. So I could create web pages and define the JavaScript, the HTML, the CSS, and whatever metadata information about that page. And that page will be available immediately I save this information, as well as the static information that attached to it. So other notable features are rate limiting. I'm sure we all know what that is. Database migration. So Frappe is powered by a CLI tool called Bench. So migrating your database means you've made changes to your schema, or there are some kind of patches you need to make to your data. You can write a script for that. And when you run the bench migrates, it automatically migrates your schema and run those patch scripts. It also supports translation. So everything you see in the desk UI are in the default, or the default system setting, which is English. So you could actually set it to translate to one of the supported language, or you can extend the support for other languages by writing your own, importing your own language file. Um, Automatic backups are also a thing there. So it also allows you to configure backups to be taken for your database, and you can decide to also automate the process of uploading those backup objects to a cloud, maybe S3 or GCP or whatever object storage you have. Um, so read replica is what we use to sort of reduce the load on our primary database. So some of the DevOps guys here might know how to create a read replica. It's just a copy of your database, but only is read only. So it would Frappe would direct all queries to your replica without having to cause much overhead on your production database. So this is also supported by default. You have to enable it as well. You can turn it off and on. And then it also has support for units and, of course, UI testing embedded within it. So it has a test runner that you can use to write your scripts, and you can run those test scripts basically. So that's how Frappe basically helps with productivity. Um, so I'll end this by saying productivity is not defined by how hard you work. It's just for you to work smarter and not harder. So like I know working hard pays and all of that, but there are times where you have to be more productive than more hardworking. Basically, I think we have those situations in our lives. So even when you work with small teams, you have to also think about how there are a number of things you want to achieve, but there might not be enough time to achieve that, or there might not be enough resource in that case. So tools like Frappe can come into play there to ease that process. So yes, we have to work hard. Like Odumodu will say, live by church or church, show workings, basically. So, but still, productivity is something that's not just defined by just how hard you work. So, thank you. That's it for me. So I think I'll take questions now. Yeah.
Um, I have a bit. Um, First question I would like to ask is, you showed in one of your slides, is a level where it has Node.js, Redis, and I think some other thing. Okay, sorry. Can you hear me now? Okay, so my name is Fuad. So I said in one of your slides, you showed where it has Node.js and Redis. So does it mean that Frappe comes along with that? When I install Frappe, I get all of this, and then I use it for the caching and every other thing. Okay. One other question is, you spoke about multi-tenancy. So I want to ask, does it mean that if I'm using Frappe, so let's say I'm building a solution where a SaaS solution where each of these companies have users, I can use it. I can use Frappe for it, where each tenancy has, or each tenant has its own. Okay, and then I think with that, okay, yeah, I think still with this question, right? Say for example, I'm using. I think what I want to really get about that is, how does Frappe do that with either MariaDB and Postgres, using it with MariaDB and Postgres, sorry, like you said. I don't know if you're keeping that, because I still have more.
Okay. So if I get your question correctly, if I get your question correctly, you're trying to understand how the multi-tenancy works. It is okay. So maybe I missed the slide where, okay, I think I walked through very fast, but there was a slide where I showed the architecture of Frappe. There's a folder called sites, basically. So let me say I have two sites, abc.com, xyz.com. What Frappe does is it's also integrates with Nginx. So it configures your Nginx automatically, and it also sets the proxy and the conditions for routing certain requests. So whenever a request from ABC comes to my server, Frappe is going to use the routing on Nginx to direct it to the path to that site. So if I also get one from XYZ, it knows where to direct that path. And based on the code or the server, every every site has its own database. So if I'm going through ABC, it's going to serve me data from ABC using ABC's database. The same thing goes to XYZ. So that's how one server can serve multiple sites, basically. And that's what multi-tenancy means to Frappe. So I don't know if there are any more questions.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much. Please, a round of applause.